Hi, I'm Jenny and this is my channel, Designs with Paper. Welcome! For today's card, I will be using an Altenew stamp set, Garden Grow. It's a fabulous set that has a lot of images that are perfect for making garden or greenhouse style cards. We'll also be using some Copic markers. So come along, hang out, subscribe and like, and give me a thumbs up. Thanks for stopping by. Today I am stamping with an Altenew stamp set, Garden Grow. It has a whole bunch of greenhouse style images that are perfect to make one layer cards. I'm going to be stamping these images on a piece of Neenah Solar White 80 pound that's been cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm stamping with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I will be using my Misty Stamp Positioner so that I can line those images up just perfectly to achieve that one layer card look. I know I want to use the bench and the watering can, and then one of the potted plants. I'm just not sure which plant will fit on the bench with the watering can yet. So I'm going to place that bench right in the middle of that card base. And then I'll add the watering can to it and pull a couple of the potted plants off the stamp sheet. And the first one I picked there is just a little bit too big. It doesn't fit on the bench with the watering can. So it wasn't really the look I was going for. So I traded that pot out for, there's a little teeny tiny, kind of like a seedling in a little tiny pot. And I think that fit perfectly. It took up just enough space without overcrowding the bench. Now the trick to making a one layer card is using masking paper, and I have had this package of Ink-a-Dink-a-Doo stamping mask paper forever. I like 2 or 3 years, I don't even know how long. So the first thing you need to stamp is the image that is in the front. So you kind of stamp in reverse visual order. You stamp the thing in the front first and you work your way backwards. So I'm going to stamp that watering can with the Intense Black ink, and I'm inking it up really good because I want a nice crisp line. And then I'm going to put a piece of masking paper on top of the card base right there and just re-stamp that with whatever ink is left on the stamp. You won't be able to see it very well, but it was just enough of a line there for me to see to cut it out. And I'm going to get a pair of fine tip scissors and cut it out. And I'm not going to cut the whole image out because I don't need the whole thing cut out. I just need the bottom edge that would be sitting on that bench cut out for now. And I cut right along that stamp line, just right inside that black line. Sorry, if you hear banging, my children are protesting going to bed. They're being crazy today. When I'm done with this mask, I'm going to put it on the back of the package of my stamp set so that I can reuse it for another card. Oh my heavens, my boys are nuts. Okay, once I've got that watering can masked off, I will put the bench back in and the little potted plant back in. I use the bench to make sure I've got that potted plant lined up just right. You want the bottom of the plant pot to be on the same level, as the same plane as the watering can. And using the bench stamp helps me line those up just right. Now, when I told you that I had that package of stamping mask paper for 2 or 3 years, you're going to see why. I guess I'm kind of a miser with it. I don't know. But for this little potted plant, I use, and I am not kidding you, the smallest piece of scrap masking paper that was on my desk that I could see. It is the tiniest thing I have ever seen used. I don't know. But it was perfect. It was the perfect size for that stamp. So I used it. Why not? And I'm going to cut it the same way, just right along the bottom line. I don't need to cut the whole thing out. And I for sure would not try to cut around that flower stem. I would just cut the pot if I needed to mask the whole thing. But I'm going to cut just along that bottom line and peel the backing off and put it on top of that potted plant. And then I will pull the bench stamp back in and line it up and ink it up and stamp it. Now with the watering can and the potted plant, I just used my fingertips to give a little bit of pressure, but this bench is a little bit of a bigger stamp. And when I'm using a bigger stamp, I use my rag or my long sleeve if I'm wearing one, so that my hand can slide smoothly over the lid of the MISTI so that I get a nice stamped impression. And I know that's a trick that you've seen a ton of people do. I know I've seen Kathy Zilski do it, and I've seen everybody just use their sleeve or their rag to get a nice pressure on that. Now, when I go to peel this mask off, it does not want to come off, and I don't want to pick at it with my fingernails because I don't want red nail polish on that card base. So I am using the tip of my scissors, and it was down. It's a good masking paper, but I did get it up. I'm coloring today with Copic markers, and when I color with Copic markers, I put scrap paper under my image panel. The way alcohol markers work is they soak clear into that paper, and that's why they blend so well. But my desktop is non-porous, and if my markers soaked through and left a puddle of ink on my desktop, then it could be absorbed back through the back of the paper and leave a splotch on the coloring image. So now the scrap paper will just absorb that extra ink. For the watering can, I used my toner grays. I used a T6, a T4, and a T2. And I started with my lightest and worked toward my darkest, and then back again. And I used the darkest, the T6, on the handle just at the bottom, and then right under the curve, I really wanted to give that some nice deep shadow. And I'm using the flicking method, but I'm not blending in those brush strokes. I really wanted that watering can to have that galvanized steel or that farm metal look. I really wanted to see those striations or whatever that would technically be called. I don't know. If you know what it's called, leave it in the comments. I'm just calling it striations. So I went from lightest to darkest and back again. And then when I got all the way back to my lightest color again, I went back in with that T6 and really accentuated those shadows. I really wanted that highlight in the middle to be pronounced because that is what is going to give my watering can a really nice rounded look. Also in this card, my best friend, my BFF, was my colorless blender. For whatever reason, I guess I have my wrong glasses on. I don't know. I could not stay inside the lines coloring this image. It was a mess. So thank goodness for Copic and their colorless blender because it saved my coloring. Now, I don't know, I thought I zoomed in closer so you could see better, and it just did not zoom in far enough, I guess. I'm sorry about that. For the bench, I used E49, E47, and E44. And the E49 I put just underneath the watering can, just underneath the potted plant, and then only on the parts of the legs that would have a shadow. And again, I went from lightest to darkest and back again. But the front plane of that bench, I did not use any of that darkest color on. I really wanted that to look like it was in the front. When you want something to appear to be more forward, you leave it highlighted. When you want to push something back, you color it darker. And so that's what I did. And once I went from lightest to darkest and darkest to lightest, then I went back through with my E49 and really accentuated the shadows under that potted plant and the watering can. Now, I noticed when I was coloring that the potted plant, it moved or the bench moved or something, and the line wasn't quite perfect. So I just took a fine tip Sharpie pen and drew the line, the back line of that bench, and you'll never know. There I am with my BFF, my colorless blender. For the pots on the plants, I wanted them to have that terracotta clay look. So I went on Pinterest and found a color combination that is E97, E19, and E08. And I colored them the same way, lightest to darkest, then darkest to lightest, leaving the highlight in the middle. And on those two pots on the left side, or the top side right now, I put I added a shadow right under that lip at the top, so it would really accentuate that top part was a little bit wider, that lip was there. Now there's not a lot of real estate, and probably I didn't need 3 colors, but I really felt like to get the shadows and the dimension I wanted, I needed that darkest, that 08, to really add some dimension there. Oh my heavens, I can hear my boys giggling. They're supposed to be going to sleep. Crazy kids. And there I go with my BFF, and that colorless blender saved my life on this card. For the dirt, I just used those same E47, E44. There's not a lot of dirt in that pot, so it wasn't really necessary to pull another color combination out. For the plants and the greenery, I just used two colors. There's almost nothing there. So I took the darkest, the G28, and I did the stem and the tiny inside of the leaves, and then I used the G05 to do the rest of the leaf. Now for the stripe on that, or the band on that watering can, and for the flowers, I used my favorite yellow combination. It's a E11, E15, and E19, and they blend together so nice, and I've never had a problem blending that yellow combination together. It's just a really nice summery lemony yellow. And again, I put the darker colors off to the sides of that watering can and left the highlight in the middle just to continue to add that roundness. And then I pulled a pink out to do the center of the flower that I don't even know what color that was. Now when I got done, I noticed that it wasn't really centered, and the sentiments in this set aren't big enough to allow for an offset image very well. So I pulled out my Lawn Fawn large stitched rectangle dies and used the largest one, and I'm going to use some washi tape to tape it down, and I'm going to run it through my Cuttlebug. Now I have had this Cuttlebug longer than at least my youngest child, who's 8, and maybe even longer than my next youngest child, who's 10. Like forever I've had this thing, and it just keeps going. I keep waiting for it to die. In fact, I thought I broke it once. No, it's still going. It's like the Energizer Bunny. Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. I don't know. Or is that Timex? I don't know. So now that this is no longer going to be a one-layer card, I have to figure out what to do with it. And I have this yellow card base on my desk from a different project, and it is an 8.5 and 11 inch piece of paper cut at 4 1/4 and scored at 5.5. And I didn't do a very good job folding it, and the crease was not nice because I didn't use a bone folder probably. So I just flipped it inside out and recreased it. And it really is important when you're using a top folding card especially to use a bone folder, because you're folding against the grain of the paper. So here I'm looking at this and I'm going, do I like this? Do I not like this? Do I like this? Doesn't matter, this is where we're going. So I decided to just go ahead and tape that card panel down on the card base. And for me, I prefer a tape adhesive. I'm a hot mess with liquid glue, so I don't use it unless it's the only option. And I really like my ATG gun because it has a ton of adhesive in it. I don't have to worry about running out mid-project. Now I'm lining up that card base with the grid lines on my mat and just kind of eyeballing the card panel, which I don't measure, which is probably why it got off center in the first place, so whatever. But there we go. And then I decided to go ahead and grab one of the sentiments from the stamp set, Grown with Love, and stamp it with my Misty on the front of this card. And I used my Misty because it's a really fine line sentiment, and I didn't want to push down too hard. So with the Misty, if I stamped it and it wasn't perfect, I could stamp it again without worrying about messing up the sentiment. I just lined it up with the grid lines on the Misty door and pulled out that intense black ink, and it stamped perfectly the first time. Just a little bit of pressure with my fingertips and it was perfect. All right, so there we go. Sometimes when you start a project, you have one plan, and then it ends up being something entirely different. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and have a good day. I'll see you next time. Thanks.